Join our Patreon.
Do you really want to know? We are Mythvision.
Dr. Price, Stephen French asks an interesting question. I'll kind of get to the point here, if you will. He's been reading Bert and Mac's Myth of Innocence, and Mark describes a passion as lasting only 6 hours. Death by crucifixion is caused by suffocation. The victim must raise themselves up against the pain of the nails in the wrist and ankles in order to breathe. When their strength runs out, they suffocate. 6 hours is a very short time. The Romans were much more cruel than that. Was the body of the victim removed? Normal practice was to leave the body to rot. Why take it down? I know this is a bit macabre, but these are the
Macabre.
Macabre?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Creepy.
Okay. But these are the type of questions this strategist asked. How did they get the cross off, or the body off the cross? How did they remove the nails? Did they cut the cross up with a big, great wood saw? Did they have a metal hacksaw to cut through the nails? The whole concept of removing a fresh cadaver, right? Cadaver from the cross without significant tools or destroying the body astonishes me. I've never heard any of these issues identified or discussed. Anyway, keep up the good work. Best, Steve.
Well, it's interesting. I love Bert and Mac's book on Mark. It's really great in a lot of ways. As far as the time of his death, Mark notes that it's real unusual, because when Joseph of Arimathea asks for custody of the body, Pilate says, what, he's dead already? And he sends somebody to confirm it. Yeah, and I said, well, yeah, okay, take it. And so, yeah, it usually did take longer, though it wasn't unparalleled for people to die more quickly. However, this raises the big question, why does it matter? If anything, you would guess they would extend the amount of time it took to make Jesus' death even more horrific and grisly, as if Mel Gibson were writing the thing. But some commentators have always said this is because Jesus wasn't dead. They thought he was, but when they gave him that vinegar to drink, that knocked him out and slowed down the respiration and all that, so that the casual examination said, oh yeah, this guy's dead, and that he was later revived in the tomb. Well, we know people survived crucifixion sometimes. Josephus mentions a friend of his whom he saw crucified and asked Titus if he would, well, 3 guys he knew, asked Titus if he could release them from the cross, and he did. 2 of them were too far gone and died, but one of them survived and was treated. And so it's not impossible. This was a theory preferred by the old-time rationalists who, this sounds very strange to us, but they believed the Bible was virtually inerrant, that everything it said happened, did happen. But of course, there's no violations of natural law. So it may be that the writers couldn't understand the causation involved, and so they said that, and what they knew was that Jesus was crucified and that Jesus appeared alive to his disciples shortly thereafter. Well, the way to connect the dots is to say that he didn't die on the cross, and that there are even hints of this in the story, like why mention that he died already? That it was short. Why bother mentioning the soporific they gave him? They usually would give you some kind of drug to ease the pain, but so it's not that hard to imagine. And they always like to quote against this something that, oddly enough, David Friedrich Strauss said, that you can rule this out because if Jesus did get nursed back to health, he would have been such a pathetic scarecrow. Nobody would have said, oh, look, he's conquered death. I think that's naive. If you thought the guy was dead, but oh my God, he's still alive. You'd be celebrating like crazy. It wouldn't occur to you that he hadn't conquered death. So, and there are other hints too, for instance, that when Jesus prayed to be spared the crucifixion, what God's going to say, tough luck. I mean, if anybody's prayer is going to be answered, I mean, it's not impossible to think otherwise, but you'd think that it would work. In fact, in Hebrews, it says that in the days of his flesh, he cried out with loud cries and tears to be delivered, and he was heard. Doesn't that mean he wasn't killed? Saying it doesn't make it so. But do we possibly have a fragment of tradition here from a largely suppressed story? In the Gospel of John, this stuff about him getting speared in the side, there's a lot of debate about this, even among physicians. If depending on which side the spear came from, it might have been, if it came up the left side, it would have punctured a lung and his heart, and that would have been it. But if it went from the right side, not necessarily. And so some say, well, yeah, but he must have been alive because of the water and the blood, pericardial fluid and blood. But others say, if he was dead, he wouldn't have bled, period. But the point is, why does John, and only John, have this stabbing? In fact, it looks like an insertion, because in John, right up to that, it says that they broke the legs of the other two guys to hasten their death, because they couldn't brace themselves to breathe anymore, and that's that. But with Jesus, they said, let's not waste the time. This guy's dead already. So knowing that he was dead, the narrative said, etc., etc., but then suddenly we hear that they don't know if he's dead, and that's why they stab him. And then the writer says, out of his side came water and blood, and he who saw this testifies to it, and all that. It looks like an insertion, and to what end? Well, to squelch the idea that he wasn't dead. I mean, why here say, yeah, I'm telling you this so that you will believe the right thing about Jesus? There's no such statement at the cross anywhere else. So this is, it's making an assertion about something. Earlier in the Gospel of John, these Greeks come up, as they would to Philip, I think, sir, we would see Jesus, and they don't get to. And Jesus goes into, I have other sheep and all this stuff, and so on. And then later still, Jesus says, where I am going, you cannot come. And the Pharisees or whoever say, well, what does he mean? Well, where's he going to go? Is he going to go out into the diaspora and preach there? Well, this is speculation, but it sounds to me like they're saying, yeah, this was another misunderstanding that Jews held, that Jesus skipped the country. And of course, there are people that have always thought he did and went into the diaspora or to India or whatever. And this is a way of saying no. And in fact, what was the deal with the Greeks? And why is it dropped? Well, I think it's because this was a version of what we later hear in Eusebius about Abgarus, the king of Edessa, sending messengers to Jesus saying, I hear you're in trouble. Why don't you take refuge in my kingdom? It's small but big enough for the both of us. And Jesus writes back and says, I can't. I have to go through with my mission, but don't worry, I will. He said he was sick too, and I'll send a disciple to heal you. I just can't help speculating that John is trying to rebut a belief among Christians that, yeah, he did go into the diaspora. That's why you didn't see him anymore. He said, no. That option was raised, but he rejected it, and he stayed the course and died. Then one last thing about this. Why are we told that Joseph of Arimathea was rich? And is it simply because it said in Isaiah 53 he was numbered among the transgressors, and he was buried in a rich man's tomb? Well, that can't be. It can't be, I think, that the gospel writers are just saying, well, just to show that a prophecy was fulfilled. I think it's because it isn't thinking of that Isaiah passage. Rather, this is part of the narrative that is not completely on the page anymore. It's like these novels in which someone is sick or struck or something. They're thought to be dead. They're prematurely buried in an opulent tomb, rich family. And that's why thieves take note of this and say, hey, it's been sealed. There must be rich funerary tokens in there. Let's go get them. And when they do, they say, oh no, she's not dead. We got a witness now. What do we do? And so, should we kill her? No, let's take her and sell her as a slave. And they come to the tomb to mourn. She's gone. And the woman's fiancé says, oh, the gods have taken her. They were jealous of her beauty. And then they say, no, look, they figure out what actually happened. I think that was Joseph of Arimathea being rich, was to explain why tomb robbers opened the tomb and saw Jesus snapping out of it, coming around, and then he got out of it. I don't know if this is true, but there's so many interesting things that point to it. And in different Gospels, I've come to think that there must have been a version of the story in which Jesus survived death. I'm not saying that's what happened, right? I'm not even sure there was a Jesus, but it seems to me that's the best explanation of a bunch of details that make no sense otherwise.
I think it's interesting, just on that, riffing on that, is the cries of, like, will you save me, right? He's asking his father, hey, take this cup from me if you will, but let your will be done, right? Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds very much like the cry of Jonah in the belly of the well. Very much like it. And we know there's a direct connection, just as Jonah was in the belly of the well for 3 days and 3 nights, so shall the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth. Mm-hmm. He mentions that he is in Sheol, or he's going to death, if you will. But the narrative never acts as though it's like he died but didn't die. That's what Jonah seems like. Like when you're reading it, I'm dead. I mean, I'm at the foundation of the mountains beneath the sea. I'm dead. I'm down here. I'm dead. I'm in Sheol. But next thing you know, he comes up. He's spewed out. So I don't know if it ultimately would matter. This is an interesting speculation, what you're discussing here. But I don't know, looking at mimesis, I wonder, if it's just part of something, honestly, still celestial or something,
If they... I don't think anybody is on record in the ancient world saying that Jonah died and was raised from the dead. Right. And not even Matthew says that. So that doesn't mean they were right, but it seems to mean that he says, okay, I'm as good as dead, and that however he survived. But it just seems to me that it's really the tip of the iceberg when it says he died after only 6 hours, meaning, wink, wink, he isn't dead. And so that's kind of what I think, that there was a version of that fits in with the whole thing that Nicholsberg points out, that we have a bunch of Jewish stories where the persecuted righteous prevails in the end. God rescues him somehow, delivering him from his foes like Joseph and Daniel and so on. Both of them have near-death experiences.
So he might be another one of those.
And according to the narrative logic, he wouldn't have been dead. He would have been rescued.
And John really makes sure that you know he's dead.
Yeah, that's why he's got the Thomas thing. That, look, you don't think it's really me that I died on the cross? Well, take a look at this. Nobody else even mentions that Jesus was nailed to the cross. It's the only place that comes up is in John chapter 20. Put your fingers in the nail holes. We don't know if the others thought that Jesus was tied or nailed to the cross. So, but then, supposing, well, dead or alive, Jesus was taken down. How did they do it? Well, they found the body of a guy who was crucified in Galilee, I think, and it was still in decent shape, and you could tell that they had nailed him through the wrists and through both feet. And how did they take him down? Apparently they used pinchers to draw out the nails, but it didn't quite work on the feet because the placement of the nail meant that it got hung up on the guy's ankle bones as they tried to take it out. So they sawed off the little wedge they put under the feet so they didn't die immediately. They could still hoist their chest up, pressing against this little thing. I forget the name of it. So in this guy's case, the nail is still there in the skeletal feet and the block of wood. They tried to pull it out, but interference, they couldn't. So that isn't a big mystery, really. And of course, if they simply tied them, as they sometimes did, well, that's no problem at all. Just snip the ropes.
Join our Patreon.